Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girivara Gopi Chandra Yasoda Nandana Pradajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Yamuna Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namaskar Das Thakur ki jai. Prem Saho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Sri Radha Krishna Govindra Shyamakunda Radha Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Navadip Dham ki jai. Ganga Jamuna Tulsi Bhakti Devi ki jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Go Premanandi. All glories to the Sam of the devotees, all glories to the Sam of the devotees, all glories to the Sam of the devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Guranga, all glories to Sri Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prachadane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastatade Shatadane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 48, Verse 12. Akrura Bhavanam Krishna Saha Ram Uddhava Prabhu Kinchit Chakirshayan Pragat Akrura Priya Kamyaya Akrura Bhavanam, the home of Akrura, Krishna Saha, with Rama Uddhava, Lord Balaram and Uddhava, Prabhu, Supreme Lord, Kinchit, something, Chakirshayan, wanting to have done, Pragat, went, Akrura, of Akrura, Priya, satisfaction, Kamyaya, desiring. Translation, then Lord Krishna, wanting to have some things done, went to Akrura's house with Balaram and Uddhava. The Lord also desired to please Akrura. Purport, the previous incident of Lord Krishna's visit to Akrura's house and now his visit to Akrura's gives a fascinating glimpse into the daily activities of Sri Krishna in Mathura city. Akrura stood up in great joy when he saw them, his own relatives, and the greatest of exalted personalities, coming from a distance. After embracing them and greeting them, Akrura bowed down to Krishna and Balaram, and was greeted by them in return. Then, When his guests had taken their seats, he worshipped them in accordance with the scriptural rules. Report Srila Jiva Goswami points out that Lord Sri Krishna and the others approached Akrura in a friendly attitude. At first, Akrura reciprocated that friendly mood, and then, in the course of showing them hospitality, he adopted his natural devotional attitude towards Krishna and thus offered his obeisances to Krishna and Balaram. O king, Akrura bathed the feet of Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram and then poured the bath water on his head. He presented them with gifts of fine clothing, aromatic sandalwood paste, flower garlands, and excellent jewelry. After thus worshipping the two lords, he bowed his head to the floor. He then began to massage Lord Krishna's feet, placing them on his lap, and with his head bowed in humility, he addressed Krishna and Balaram as follows. Akrura said, "It is our good fortune that you two lords have killed the enemy Kamsa and his followers, thus delivering your dynasty from endless suffering and causing it to flourish. You both are the original Supreme Person, the cause of the universe and its very substance. Not the slightest subtle cause or manifest product of creation exists apart from you." Purport: after praising Krishna and Balaram for having saved their dynasty, Akrura now points out that the Lord actually has no mundane connection with any social or political institution. He is the original personality of Godhead, performing his pastimes for the benefit of the entire universe. O Supreme Absolute Truth, with your personal energies, you create this universe and then enter into it. Thus, one can perceive you in many different forms by hearing from authorities and by direct experience. Purport: the grammatical agreement of Sruta Prataksha Gocharam in the neuter case with Atma Shristamidam Vishwam indicates that the Supreme Lord, by entering his creation with his potencies, makes himself perceivable within the universe. Throughout the Bhagavatam and other Vedic literatures, other authorized Vedic literatures, we often find descriptions of the Lord's simultaneous supremacy over all things and his identity with them. We cannot reasonably draw any other conclusion from Vedic literature than the one powerfully preached by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Achintya Bhed Abheda Tattva, that is, the absolute truth is greater than and distinct from everything, since he is omnipotent creator and controller of all, and simultaneously one with everything, since that all that exists is the expansion of his own power. Throughout these chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam, we also observe one of the unique, extraordinary features of this great work. Whether Krishna is sending his message to the gopis or accepting the prayers of Akrura, there is constant philosophical discussion throughout the Bhagavatam. The steady combination of fascinating pastimes and persistent spiritual philosophy is an extraordinary feature. We are allowed to glimpse and even to relish the spiritual emotions of the Lord and his liberated associates. And yet, we are constantly reminded of their ontological position lest we lapse into a cheap anthropomorphic vision. Thus, it is entirely in character with the work that Akrura in his ecstasy glorifies the Lord of the precise philosophical prayers. So, here we have another story, that is Krishna and Balaram and Uddhava going to Akrura's house. They actually promised previously that they would go to his house, but they became busy with when they got to Mathura, and then finally they killed Kamsa. So here they got the opportunity to visit him in his house. And these verses describe how Akrura welcomed them. Now, of course, from the point of view of the people of Vrindavan, Akrura is an enemy. They don't like him at all. But from the point of view of the Yadus, of course, Akrura was very beneficial because he brought Krishna and Balaram from Vrindavan, and then they killed Kamsa, and then they were freed from their oppression. So he was also regarded with, given great regard by the Yadus because of his service of bringing Krishna. In any case, we cannot blame him because he is simply the instrument also of Krishna's will ultimately. And Krishna made such an arrangement to eventually come to Mathura, and his medium was Akrura. He was served as the person to do that. So Krishna had no ill feelings towards him. Already Narada Muni delivered the message that you cannot stay in Vrindavan forever. You have to go to Mathura and you have to kill Kamsa and other demons because the Devatas are waiting for this. That's one of your purposes of coming to the material world. Therefore, Akrura was the medium, and he came to Mathura, and then he killed Kamsa, and later on he killed Jarasandha and so many other demons. So he is participating in pastimes with the Yadus as well, with friendly exchanges. So one of these persons is Akrura, and here he gives him great respect. He does not regard him with any sort of animosity, rather he comes to his house and he welcomes this opportunity to be with his devotee. So therefore Akrura also is another type of devotee, but he's also in dasya rasa, and that type of rasa is also imbued with the understanding that Krishna is the Supreme Lord. Whereas the servants of Krishna in Vrindavan don't think like that. Krishna is just their master, and he's a cowherd boy, son of Nanda Maharaj. But here, Uddhava understands that Krishna is actually the supreme unborn Lord, and he has appeared in this material world to help the Devatas and to help the suffering Yadus, devotees, etc. So, therefore, he starts to speak about Supreme Lord by praising him. So this type of praise is very suitable to Uddhava or any of the Yadus. It is not suitable for the people of Vrindavan. So Nanda Maharaj would never make statements like this. He would praise Krishna because of Krishna's beauty and how he's got so much affection for his parents, etc. And how he gives them bliss and how he protects them from demons. But they will never address him as Supreme Lord and then start to explain his position in relation to the material world. But it is quite natural for the Yadus and people like Akrura to do so, because they, as well as being the relatives of Krishna and also having Dasya Rasa, they also regard him as Supreme Lord. And we see it's quite a strong tendency, in spite of the fact that they are also relatives of Krishna. So, therefore, quite naturally, they express themselves in this way. So, in verse 19, Uddhava here talks about, he addresses Krishna as Brahman. Oh, Brahman, you are the Supreme Brahman. And you create this material world through your energies. Svashakti bhi. So, this of course gives rise to a lot of discussion, because generally Brahman is without Shaktis and it is simply impersonal. But here the usage that of the word Brahman is obviously personal, because Brahman creates the material world, so it cannot be impersonal Brahman at all. Impersonal Brahman doesn't create anything. There's nothing to create for as far as Mayavad philosophy is concerned. This Brahman actually operates through Shaktis and creates the material world. At the same time, this Brahman is standing before Uddhava in the form of Krishna. He's obviously not impersonal. He has his personal form, and he's addressing Krishna as Brahman. So just as the Brahma Sutras, they begin by talking about inquiry into Brahman, talk of Brahma Jigyasa. And then it says that, what is that Brahman? Janma Jasya Yataha. From that Brahman, arises the universe. So, this of course defeats Mayavad philosophy if we take the words directly, because Brahman doesn't create anything. There's nothing else. Everything else is illusion, so there is no real creation at all. So to talk about and define Brahman as the creator of the universe, it becomes a very, very difficult proposition for a Mayavadi. So this Brahman, therefore, is referred to as actually Bhagavan by the Vaishnavacharyas. All the Vaishnavacharyas. Brahman does not mean impersonal Brahman at all. Brahman here means the greatest. Who is the greatest? Bhagavan. A person with the form, qualities, activities, who, through his energies, manifests a real material world, not a false world. A real material world. So this is exactly what Akrura says here, that you create this universe. Idam Vishvam Atma Shrishtam. You have created this universe by your Shakti. And you've entered the universe as well. And in this way, you can be perceived through the universe in different forms, both by hearing from authorities and by direct experience. Shruti, Prataksha, Gocharam. So you are perceivable within the material world. This indicates Supreme Lord is Brahman, not impersonal, but Bhagavan. So Brahman does not always mean impersonal. Secondly, this Supreme Lord creates the material world, and the material world is real. And it is done through his energies, his Shakti. So that means he doesn't have to do it directly. The Lord does not have to, in his personal form as Bhagavan, use his hands and start doing things and making universes by himself. He does it through his Shakti, through his energy. So this introduces the idea that the Lord has Shakti, by which he accomplishes so many things in the material world and the spiritual world. So, of course, all Vaishnavas will accept that, and in the Gaudiya Sampradaya particularly, we define three broad Shaktis: the internal energy, the Chit Shakti or Sarup Shakti of the Lord, that manifests everything in the spiritual world, including the form, qualities, and activities of the Lord. We have the external energy, or Bahiranga Shakti, which manifests the material world, everything here. And that is the matter and time and the karma, etc. All this is under Bahiranga Shakti. And then we have Jiva Shakti, Jivas. They're different from Bahiranga Shakti. They're different from the internal Shakti of the Lord. And they're not the Lord. So these are the Shaktis. And then we have Supreme Lord, who controls the Shaktis. So when we use the word Shakti, we in no way indicate that the Shakti is independent and supreme. It belongs to the Supreme Lord, who we call the Shaktiman, possessor of the Shakti. So the Lord has his Shaktis which he controls and he operates. And so through the Bahiranga Shakti, he manifests the material world. What does the Bahiranga Shakti do? It manifests universes and material bodies. It manifests material elements. So we get Prakriti manifesting into false ego, Mahatattva, mind, intelligence, senses, sense objects, 5 gross material elements. They form into universes. And the same elements are used to make bodies for the living entity. So this is Vishvam, the material world, made out of energy of the Lord. So it is the Supreme Lord who makes that Bahiranga Shakti operate. It doesn't operate by itself. And so to illustrate that, we have the image of Mahavishnu glancing over Prakriti, then it becomes active to do something. So it doesn't operate on its own. Prakriti cannot say, oh, now I'm going to start creating. It hasn't got an identity. There's no jiva there to say I. It sits there. And when the Lord wants it to do something, then he stimulates it. And he sticks the jivas in it. And time begins to operate and it manifests. So it's under the Lord's will. The glance of the Supreme Lord. It's Mahavishnu. So in this way, the material creation takes place. So though, in one sense, it's separate from the Lord, matter is different from the Lord, it's the Shakti, and he's the Shaktiman. In that sense, we say different. The two are also one. In the sense that the Shakti and the Shaktiman are one. We cannot separate the two things, the energy and the Supreme Lord. They go together. Of course, the Shakti is not independent. The Lord is independent. But he's always with his Shaktis. He's never apart from his Shaktis. But the internal energy, of course, we can say, yes, he's never apart from that because he always has his form, qualities, and activities in the spiritual world. So he's eternally with his Antaranga Shakti, internal energy. What about the external energy? Sometimes it appears, sometimes it disappears, whatever. So even though it is not exactly so intimate in relation to the Lord, still it's one with the Lord. But to distinguish it, we call it Bahiranga, external. It is inferior. There's Antaranga, internal, intrinsic to the Supreme Lord. The other is external, not so much interested in it. But it's his energy. So the Lord is one with his internal energy, and it's not very difficult to understand that because he manifests his form, qualities, and activities, all one with the Lord, etc. But a little more difficult to understand how the Lord is one with matter, which is inert, unconscious, ignorance, etc. How can the Lord be one with that? So some people find it very difficult to accept that. So, of course, Shankaracharya, he doesn't accept it at all, and therefore says it doesn't exist. The material world doesn't exist. Because how can the Lord be one? Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. Brahman is one with everything. But how can it be one with matter? So, solution, no matter. And then only Brahman exists. So there is no problem. So when we say the Lord is one with everything, then it becomes a little bit complicated or contradictory. How can the Lord be one with the material world when it is unconscious and so on, like the Supreme Lord? So then we have one solution of Shankaracharya where he says nothing else exists. The universe doesn't really exist. It's illusory. But that is not the position of the Vaishnavas. We all say, okay, the material world does exist. It's real. Then how do we explain Scripture, which says Sarvam Kalvidam Brahman, whatever, only the Lord exists, one thing? How do we explain it? So many Vaishnavacharyas will say, we don't take it literally. He's one because he's supreme. That's all. Not that he's literally only he exists, but rather he is the number one existing thing. That's all. And everything is under his control. In that sense, he's one with everything. Just as in a country, if we have a king or a leader who's very powerful, then we talk about the country, but we talk about it in terms of that leader. Everything in terms like Hitler, then we talk about Hitler, and he's identical with his country more or less because he's controlling it absolutely or whatever. So the Lord is one. He's one with everything because he controls everything. So it's an indirect, Lakshana type of interpretation of the word, not a direct meaning. So that's how many Vaishnavas will treat this term in order to overcome this contradiction. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, why should we interpret these words? As much as possible, we should try to give direct meaning to everything. So we have direct meaning, or abhida, over lakshana in most cases, except where there's extreme contradiction. So he says the way we can do this with this statement, that the Lord is everything, is by this achintya bheda bhed. The Lord is with everything, simultaneously different from everything. Not that he is exactly the material world and only the material world. That's one aspect of him. Also, he's different from it. So he is different from it, fine, and he's supreme and controlling it. At the same time, he is one with it. And this way, we don't have to contradict the direct meaning of the Shruti statements. So the Lord is one with material world. How? Because it's his energy, and he's one with his energy. So the energy itself, of course, transforms into matter and so many things which look quite different from the Supreme Lord. But that's done through his Shakti. But in a sense, the Shakti and the Lord are very intimately connected, so we say they are one. So the Lord is one and simultaneously different. So that is what is expressed here in this verse, where it talks about how the Lord creates with his Shakti and he enters into it, and one can perceive the Lord everywhere in the material world because he's one with it. As I said, there's not much, no real contradiction in the spiritual world, where we have the internal energy operating, so we have the Lord and his form, obviously non-different. It's not a material body, it's a spiritual form, and he's non-different from his spiritual form, and non-different from his name, non-different from his qualities and activities. So, the antaranga energy and the Lord very quite close together, so we don't find much of a contradiction there. But with that external energy, there's more of a contradiction. But then we come to the Jiva Shakti. So generally we say the jivas are different from the Supreme Lord. They are anu, small, subject to ignorance. Supreme Lord is vibhu, all-pervading, everywhere, and not subject to ignorance at all. So they're, again, quite different. But they are both conscious, of course, so a little bit different from Bahiranga Shakti and Supreme Lord. Some similarity is there because conscious. But we have many jivas, one Supreme Lord. And Supreme Lord is all-powerful, jivas are not all-powerful. So we got difference there also. So we got some similarity in qualities, and we have also some differences in qualities. More similarities than with Bahiranga Shakti. But nevertheless, still we have differences. So we generally distinguish the jiva from the Supreme Lord. But according to Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva, yes, there is that difference, but there's also oneness, even with the jiva. So the jiva and the Lord are one as well. Because of being Shakti of the Lord, and the Shakti being the same as the Lord. This, of course, leads also to a little bit of a negative condition, where we have the jiva merging into Brahman and becoming one with Brahman. So that part, the Vaishnavas don't like. But that's one condition to illustrate how the jiva is one with the Supreme Lord. He merges in Brahman. In that sense, he identifies completely with the Lord. So it's a type of oneness, even though the jiva does not completely disappear. But he feels oneness with the Lord in that sense. And he's no longer feels any separation. But then we have another oneness also. That is with the Siddha jivas in the spiritual world and the Supreme Lord. Yes, they are different because they have their particular bodies, spiritual bodies, and they identify themselves with an I, and then they have Supreme Lord, and they're serving him in different ways. So that's obviously a difference there. But there's also a great oneness between the Supreme Lord, such that they exchange positions sometimes. And the devotee becomes more powerful than the Lord. So the identity of the Lord as the Lord also begins to disappear, especially when he's in the form of Krishna and Vrindavan. And then Krishna is controlled to an extreme degree by his devotees, and he seems to lose his aspect as being the Supreme Lord, and the devotee becomes greater than him, in the case of Vatsalya Rasa and whatnot. Or in the case of Madhurya Rasa, where Radha controls Krishna, or the gopis control Krishna. So, therefore, the distinction of being so different begins to disappear within Rasa. And they may be equal, or the jiva may become superior to the Lord, etc. So in that sense, there's a type of oneness also, because the aspect of power disappears with Krishna particularly. But on the other hand, the difference remains. The jiva is always the jiva. He never becomes Supreme Lord or anything. He's, by nature, he's a jiva. So that's the difference aspect. But the oneness aspect is there in the sense that the boundaries between the greater one and the lesser one, the controller and the controlled, those type of concepts disappear. So, therefore, there is oneness and difference of the jiva with the Supreme Lord also. So, this in no way contradicts the scripture. We find so many scriptural statements to show how there is difference and how there also is oneness. So, we combine these together and we get Beda Bed. But that is in one sense contradictory. How can things be opposite? How can everything be one with the Lord and also be different from the Lord? In material world, it doesn't make sense. This is a yellow flower. How can it be red? It can't be. It's yellow. It cannot be red and yellow. This flower is red. It cannot be yellow. So to say this flower is yellow and red, it doesn't make sense. So the same way, to say that the Lord is one with everything and different from everything, from material logic, doesn't make sense at all. It's nonsense. So some philosophers will reject this Beda Bed philosophy because it doesn't make sense. So, of course, from the spiritual point of view, normal logic does not apply anyway, so we can't use that as a good argument. And to logically explain everything, we could say the Lord has a Achintya Shakti, inconceivable energy by which what looks impossible for us is possible for the Lord. So he can have oneness and difference from everything simultaneously. Right? Achintya Shakti. So we have Achintya Beda Bed philosophy coming out of that. There are other explanations of Beda Bed. Even impersonal Beda Bed is there. Some followers of Shankaracharya made up a Beda Bed philosophy also. It generally got rejected because it's not logically possible. And Nimbarka also has a Beda Bed. Swabhavik Beda Bed. But Lord Chaitanya's is Achintya Beda Bed. The difference and similarity or oneness are coexist because of the Achintya Shakti of the Lord. So that is Lord Chaitanya's philosophy, and that distinguishes our Sampradaya's philosophy from others.
Maharaj, we see here that Akrura has an exalted philosophical understanding of the Supreme Lord. In comparison to the gopis, they don't have any philosophical understanding. They love Krishna. Here we have. So how does he get this philosophical exaltation? Is it because he is an eternal associate of the Lord? Or how does he get this understanding?
Well, obviously, if a person is an associate of the Lord, either a sadhana siddha or a nitya siddha, his capacity of as a jiva is very great. So his knowledge fully manifests automatically. It's not that he has to go and study books and do things like that. So he has all sorts of knowledge automatically. Now, some of that knowledge may be blocked by the Supreme Lord through Yoga Maya for pastimes or whatever. And we see in the case of the Brajavasis, their very intense bhava itself blocks off knowledge. Oh, this is Krishna. So even if they see Krishna and they still it's blocked off, and they don't respect him like Krishna at all as Supreme Lord. But with the Yadus and others outside of Vrindavan, then this does not happen. Their nature is to accept Krishna as Supreme Lord and see him as such. So in other words, their particular place and their bodies and their relationship with Krishna is such that it allows them to have this type of knowledge revealed. So it is not in any way restricted by Yoga Maya or any of their tendencies at all. Whereas in Vrindavan, yes, it is hidden or restricted. So we say it's natural to jivas in the spiritual world to have that. But with the Brajabasis, then it is restricted because of their intense bhava and yoga maya, etc.
Sometimes we also say big philosophy like Venus. Sometimes we say Imams also say big philosophy, and also is almost something like it's a practical also, like a Hiranyakashipu.
Well, of course, it's often said that the demons they can be philosophical, and philosophically it veers towards impersonalism. You'll see, they as far as they get, because obviously Hiranyakashipu does not accept a Supreme Lord. But he'll accept Atma, and the Atma is eternal, and we go from body to body. So he'll accept the Atma part, but not the Supreme Lord part of it, because he's obviously the enemy of Vishnu, so he doesn't accept him as Supreme Lord. So their tendency is to be impersonal. And that is why Prahlad also laments his condition. He says, actually, also I'm contaminated by this family because father is an impersonalist and whatever. As well as being a demon, he's also an impersonalist, like this. So, generally, it's impersonal knowledge. Some Atma Jnana is there.
In the beginning of the class, you were saying about this Akrura, like, gopis, they hate him, and, yodhas love him because about bringing Krishna. So now we see in the material also same thing happened. One person may be good for one group, and another same person may be bad for the another group. So now how to see this?
Well, obviously, in spiritually speaking, it's not the same type of hatred as in the material world. Material world, everyone is covered by ignorance. There, nobody is covered by ignorance. So definitely in the spiritual world, the people of Vrindavan resent Uddhava for taking Krishna away, and it's said that the gopis cursed him, and therefore later on he got involved with this whole incident with the Satadhanva and others. It's not the same type of hatred as in the material world. It's all. It only arises because of great attachment to Krishna. If they were not attached to Krishna, then they wouldn't hate Akrura. But they're so attached to Krishna that because he took them away, therefore they have this hatred. So it's manifested in relation to their attachment to Krishna, and only to that, and nothing else. Material world, there's no attachment to Krishna, it's only attachment to another material person or whatever like that. So this is with Krishna. So it's an offshoot of their sthayi bhava, their intense prema. That's all.
Material world, same person cannot be good for the all, because everyone has a fault in the material world. So how to deal with this? Same person, one person, cannot be good for the all people.
Well, in the material world, we have to tolerate all situations. That's all. Unpredictable situations, or they're unpredictable persons, or whatever, and we have no control over that. All we can do is establish our own position in relation to Krishna, and then whatever happens after that with other people, we cannot control that, so we have to simply accept it.
Another question, Maharaj, you are saying this Vedanta Sutra, like this Janma Dasyataha. Normally this impersonalists, they accept this creation and destruction like all illusion. Okay, and what about this? How they take this maintenance part? Maintenance, how do they consider this maintenance part? This impersonalist. Normally someone is maintaining this material.
Well, for Shankar, it doesn't exist at all. It's illusion.
Maintenance is also illusion.
Yeah, it's all illusion.
If maintenance is illusion,
your bodies are illusion. Everything that happens in the material world is illusion. It's like a big dream. That's all.
Maharaj, the Lord creates the material world by his energies, Shakti, but also we know that Garbhodaksha Vishnu is the primary creator, but he is not a Shakti, but he is Bhagavan. How do you understand that, Maharaj?
Well, Krishna operates through his expansions, his amsas. So Bhagavan operates through Paramatma features to create the material world, who are himself also. And then they operate with Shaktis. So it is the Paramatma feature of the Lord who directly, or less more directly, interacts with the Bahiranga Shakti, Mahavishnu, and then Garbhodaksha Vishnu, Kshirodaksha Vishnu. So they're the ones that create, maintain, and destroy the material world. But they're also, we can say they're forms of Bhagavan. Paramatma is a form of Bhagavan.
Maharaj, and also like Mahavishnu, he glances Prakriti and Prakriti gets agitated and then the creation starts. That's what we read from Srimad Bhagavatam. So can this be considered like Mayavadis reached till this point, that Mayavadis say that Brahman, and from Brahman things comes up, and can we say that they reached up to this stage?
What?
That Mahavishnu glances Prakriti and Prakriti gets agitated, no?
No. Nothing exists. There is no creation. It's just an illusion of a creation. So nothing gets created at all.
Do they explain this,
And when that being the case, Maharaj, but how do how do they do sadhana and how do they get merged into Brahman? When things are illusion and there's nothing.
Destroy ignorance. That's all. Destroy ignorance, then you have knowledge. Then you are Brahman.
That one has to tolerate the situation and then establish one's own position with Krishna. Can you elaborate, Maharaj, what to understand that?
Well, we do bhakti and we establish a relationship through bhakti. That turns into prema. And then it doesn't really matter what happens in the material world and what people think, because people have all sorts of opinions or whatever, but we disregard that and we tolerate that situation. We can't do anything about what other people are going to think in that case.
Organization, even in terms of spiritual organization.
Well, we can't predict how people are reacting because they may have material tendencies and then therefore they may react differently. So we cannot predict everything there. So we tolerate those situations, that's all.
Maharaj, we have this verse in Srimad Bhagavatam which says that the material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. But then in material world we see demons and we see different types of vices, different types of demonic qualities. How do you understand that, Maharaj?
Well, that's a very broad metaphor, that's all. Obviously, a reflection is not the actual thing. It is somewhat different. And different mediums reflect differently. So if we reflect in the water, we don't see, if the waves are there, then we don't see exactly the same thing at all. And of course, ultimately, it's not the same because it's, the real thing here, and it's a reflection on an illusory thing on the surface. So therefore, when we say it's a reflection, all we mean is that there are similarities between material world and spiritual world in terms of forms, qualities, activities, rasas, etc. But it's not exact, obviously.